Dear White Genocide, you do not exist. In this video, I will discuss the increasingly disturbing habit of referring to the demographic shift occurring in the West and North America as a white genocide. I will also discuss the uproar surrounding the trailer of an upcoming Netflix show called Dear White People. If you haven't seen the trailer yet, there's a link in the low bar. You can pause this video, check it out, and come back. The uproar following the release of this trailer has included boycotts and cancellations of Netflix accounts. As an advocate for freedom of association, I encourage people to boycott things they do not like. But what I found out when I started the project, The Usual Jesters, it is much easier to identify things that have been said than know what is offensive. Now, let's say 10% of the white people, and we'll get back to the definition of white people later, unsubscribed to Netflix today. What would that do to its bottom line? As I mentioned in the Uber signaling video, Netflix is an international company, and in yet another example of different things happening for the same reasons, the exposure and advertising that this uproar is giving it may result in far more new subscribers than it stands to lose from a demographic that has already plateaued. When you consider the developmental schedule for a show like this, it is illogical to think that Netflix thought Donald Trump won, he's a racist human being, all the people that voted for him are racist. So let's make this trailer and add to the general blame whitey narrative. Its release is more than likely bad timing or a misjudgment in a climate that had people so sure that Hillary Clinton would be the current president of the United States of America. So yes, blame whitey has been a thing. As for blackface and cultural appropriation, there are several examples of whiteface that were not received in such a negative manner. And as discussed in a School Sucks podcast I was on, link in the low bar, how does one group own a culture for it to be appropriated? Now, on to describing the white genocide. It would be unreasonable to claim that there is no demographic shift occurring in the West and North America. As is the case with climate change, this is not about whether it's occurring or not. The key things to identify are what are the causes, what is our involvement, is it catastrophic, and what can be done to change it. As I discussed in the video, they literally mean figuratively. Words should mean what they mean. And what is going on is by no means a genocide. Calling what is going on a genocide would be similar to saying there is a panda genocide because pandas are notoriously picky at reproduction. As we are on the topic of Asia and reproduction, a similar situation is happening in Japan right now. Well, kind of similar, with the herbivore men and I think the term is Christmas cake women. The country's population is far below replacement levels, and it is estimated that more adult diapers will be sold than child diapers in the coming years. Despite these drop in numbers, there are no claims that there is a Japanese genocide. The effect of decline of reproduction is noticed far more in a place like Japan, where immigration is not that big. This example of a population leveling out is good to use against the fears of overpopulation. As I often say about Trump's comments about who Mexico was letting into the country, some being criminals and some being good people, Mexican is not a race. So even if Japan ceased to exist, a country such as China with its exploding population would more than easily carry on the Asian race. So let's try to define what people mean by white in white genocide. In the aforementioned video, I gave an example of the Japanese committing genocide against the Chinese, even though they are of the same Asian race. For the purposes of this, let's assume it is all white people in the sense of 10% of the global population. If you wanted to go into the whole one-drop rule of racial purity, then the main actress in this Dear White People trailer with her beautiful green eyes would not be considered black in a place like Nairobi, Kenya, where I'm recording this from. Now, if you want to make the case that Americans somehow have more credibility to make the case for blackness than Africans, then hiyo ni shauri yako. Now, despite my flippant dismissals in Swahili, I'll include a link to a post below where I make the case for probably just that. Now, with this general descriptor of white people, I will admit that there are fewer white babies being born. Whether this is good or bad is subjective, so I will not delve into it deeper here. Besides saying that since I personally benefit and like a lot of things that white babies who grow up into white people have created, I would describe myself as far more in Team White Baby than I would be in, for example, Team Panda Baby. So let's focus on why this is happening. I would say that the state is the main culprit. That and fiat currency, which is also another state creation. So, as a sexually dimorphic species, the males provide resources for access to reproduction, and the females seek provisions to support reproduction. The growth of the state with its redistribution of wealth through taxation, has created an alpha male that fewer males can compete with in its ability to provide for a larger number of females. This effect is not without historical precedent, and I'll link to a video below where it shows that when we were hunter-gatherers, it was about 40% of males and 75% of females reproducing, whereas when you switch to farming, fewer males could provide more resources, which resulted in the number of males reproducing dropping to 20%, whereas the females remained at 70. So, is this natural? I actually think the state is natural. I mean, it was built by humans. We're the ones who voted it in, thought it up, created it, man it, and let it continue. But unlike the climate, in which we have more of a reactionary relationship with, we have far more control in whether this state is positive or negative. In advanced societies, we see situations where both genders think they need each other as much as a fish needs a bicycle. Many find themselves in a situation where the state has become their primary parent, partner, and competitor. As I am more familiar with the MGTOW community, I will use it as an example. There are certain aspects such as a focus on self-reliance and improving one's mind and body that, in my estimation, make many of the red-pilled males that live their lives with this information far more attractive to females than your average blue-pilled male is. Not claiming this is intentional by the males, but I think it is part of our evolutionary process. So in this predatory climate of relationships, the kind of male that can have a solid, stable relationship is more capable than the average male in a less challenging time. I will admit that these calls of white genocide come more from traditionalist-minded males than they do from any other group. Now, the claims that it is people coming in and taking the white women's are completely ridiculous. There are tests that show that there's a different general level of attraction of women between races, but if it was purely on the physical attractive nature versus the potential of living in the countries where the states provide all these welfare and taxation funded benefits, then we'd have to say that it was Asian men who had the most to complain about when it comes to their females being coveted solely for their looks. So I'm going to wind this down here. As I said, there is no white genocide. Get out there, find a woman. If you really find it valuable, if you really find this white race, no matter how you define it, to be a valuable thing, you need to go out there and challenge the policies and governments that are making it so difficult for so many to engage in relationships, cohabitation, beginning of families. The bar has been set high, but you can get out there and compete with the state or defeat it as a predator that it is. The upcoming demographic winter can be treated similar to the climate winters that refined beneficial traits through the process of evolution. This can be evidenced by the rise of someone like Donald Trump, of whom much is said and disagreed upon, but one thing we can agree on is he embodies many alpha masculine traits. Another less documented example is Japan's advancements in robotics to be caregivers for their aging population. Much of the video and images included in this presentation were taken of a recent trip to the Eastleigh neighborhood of Nairobi, also known as Little Mogadishu. Many migrants from Somalia have settled there and call it home, and likely partially due to being so close to their country of origin, they will admit to you that they are not outright Kenyan. But with the inability to rely on massive welfare states that you find in Western countries, this physically self-segregated community is encouraged to economically integrate into the larger culture of the area it has moved to, and become part of the local way of life. I was accompanying my mother, who remarked on how much safer the neighborhood had become. Even though the vendors will price gouge you as an outsider, it is a signal of a slow but sure integration. With the lack of an expansive welfare state, I can imagine that if one looked at the reproductive rates of the different classes within the Eastleigh neighborhood, it would be similar to those found in more historically indigenous neighborhoods, or even that of the Parklands or Westlands neighborhoods, where most of the over 750,000 Kenyans of Indian origin, which in some countries would be considered Asian origin, call their home. Thanks for listening. Feel free to subscribe, like, or share, and remember there's links in the low bar for you to check out. Thanks until next time. Bye.